Man, that intro gets me every single time. So if you are not a Wu-Tang Killer Bees Triumph fan, go listen to the song right now because it continues to be one of my favorite ones. And I'm telling you this because I've actually started using a new studio where I can do some of the production type stuff on my own. And that's actually the first time that I've been able to on air hear the intro. And man, I'm hyped. I hope you are too. What's up, people? Welcome to another episode of the Can't Believe I Made It podcast. I am your high performance mentor and host, Desi Abeda. So today for Mentorship Monday, I figured because it's episode 99, oh my God, that just feels so good coming off my tongue. I can't believe it. I can't believe I made it. Right. So call back to our guy Justin a couple episodes ago. That was amazing. But oh my gosh, as a pod family to you all, like again, we are heading into episode 100 and we're going to be doing some giveaways. We're giving away some merch. We're giving away one of the most life-changing books that I have ever had the pleasure to use. It's a journaling book that I just can't say enough good things about. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means on Friday when we talk about the big giveaway and the big thank you. And then also what we're going to be doing is giving away a couple spots of one-to-one performance coaching, which I think is, again, it's really just a huge thank you. So with episode 99, the Wayne Gretzky episode, I'm just so excited to be able to say that we made it to 100. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm in for another 100. I've had so much fun doing this with you all. I hope that you have had the same amount of fun because this whole project would not be where it is today without you all. And shout out to like everyone else who's listening. We got 23 other countries that are listening right now to this kid from Tucson, Arizona, that's continuing to work on his self-doubt, continuing to work on his confidence of showing up each and every day. So all that being said, I wanted to hit this really big, and I found this study quite some time ago, and you kind of know though, right? Like you'll find something and you'll either create a tab, or if you're like myself who extreme ADHD, if you could see my my tabs open right now, I think I have like 11. But if you're that type of person, like I saved this a long time ago and I felt like it would be incredibly influential, but it was the science of the high five. Yes, you heard me correctly. The science of the high five. Other people have mentioned this study a couple times. I personally came across it through Mel Robbins, who has the High Five book, and she talks a great deal about it, but I wanted to dive into the research a little bit more and try to understand it. And as someone who's a huge basketball fan, this was perfect for me. Side note, go Suns. Okay. So this was perfect for me. So, I mean, and this is kind of how I want to paint this picture for you. And this is how we dive into the science of what is fantastic about human touch and just the high five. For those who have been lost in that mindset of being extremely hard on yourself because it helps you to perform, or holding yourself to the degree of accountability where you dive into a lot of self-defeating stories, phrases, like whatever that is, I can tell you right now that I was a part of that. I think my internal negative dialogue honestly started when I was like 6 or 7. I remember very adamantly, and this is kind of where I want you to look at your origin story, because again, this is a podcast about the hero's journey and diving into the habits of high performers. So going back to your origin story of when you started to recognize that your negative self-talk was not normal, like it was something that, was hurting you. Okay. So I want you to think about that as I kind of go through this story, and in one way I want you listening, and in the other way, I just want you thinking about it. And if you need to pause right now so that you can think about this origin story, because my thing now, we don't want you multitasking. So you know what, now that I'm saying this out loud, pause this right now. And what I want you to do before I go into my story is to think about your origin story real quick. Think about when that negative self-talk started to be a problem for you, where you noticed you're like, you know what, like this isn't normal, like this is unhealthy. Okay. So I want you to pause right now and think about that. Now that you're back, the first time that I remember like thinking to myself, like, wow, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, was honestly like when I was 6 or 7. I remember we lost to the youth basketball team. We lost to the Celtics. Like I remember it just like it was yesterday. And I remember I was like crying in like the handshake line. I remember I was crying and my dad had asked me like, what are you crying about? And I, at the time in my little head, I was like, oh, my ankle hurts. But I didn't really have the words or the language centers to be like, I am so mad at myself for how horrible I played. And I feel responsible for our loss today. And I can tell you, friends, each and every day since that moment, I have had a love-hate relationship with basketball, because that's where the origin story started. Like, even to this day, and this is something that I do on a day-to-day basis. For those that don't know, part of my ritual is I'll play basketball for 20 to 30 minutes because in a lot of ways, it helps me to move my body. It helps me to connect with my body. And then it also helps me to do a mental health check-in with like, where are you at with your negative self-talk today? Because that's where it started. It started in athletics. It started in basketball. And prior to that, I used to say some horrible things about myself. And you kind of know when you're in the zone, when you're in flow with whatever you're doing, you're unstoppable, right? We look at some of the greats who are in flow in some of those really big moments, right? So like anyone from the Bulls era, right, in the 90s, we look at currently now, we look at LeBron, we look at Giannis, all of the athletes that we now are growing to appreciate and have appreciated in just their championship DNA, right? And so like when we think about someone in flow, we know that like you're unstoppable. And you can probably think about this in other ways in your life right now of how you're able to execute flow and get to a point where you're so concentrated on what you're doing. And not only are you feeling passionate, you're feeling purposeful, but you're feeling like you're being productive. And that's a really great feeling. So I tell you that because what used to happen for me, and I'm sure a lot of you can really resonate, and if you can, please do me that favor. As always, take a screenshot of what I'm talking about here. Make sure that you tag us and tell your story a little bit too, because the way that we get past a lot of the shame talk is vulnerability, right? And a shit ton of empathy. Okay, so going back, like when I used to play horrible, like it would ruin a week. If I had a slew of games in my young basketball career, like it would ruin a month easily. And so when I came across this story of the science of the high five, productivity and happiness, I was like, I got to read this. It's about NBA players. And so let me kind of take you back a little bit more of the process of what they took, what they found, and how it can be useful for you in your day to day. Right. So UC Berkeley back in 2014 was taking a look at player behavior in the NBA. And what they found is like, obviously, when the game is done, you give each other high fives. And for anyone who's ever, and I tell you this story because I almost died. I've run one damn marathon, the Chicago Marathon. Okay. I think it was in like 2013 or 14. I don't remember. I've tried to like block it out. I have PTSD because of it. So I ran once and I have not run again. But what I do remember about that moment is even when I was at my lowest, a random stranger could give me a high five and that would lift my spirits just maybe to make it another additional 10 steps and then another high five. Right. And so like there's some camaraderie behind others' touch. Right. And I think as we break down our human needs, that makes total sense. A hug, a handshake. I mean, how many of us have missed that over the past 2 years now that things hopefully are starting to get back to some sort of semblance of normalcy? But how many of us missed that handshake or that hug or just merely seeing someone? And so what UC Berkeley did is they took a look at one game of each and every team. And they wanted to do it at the beginning of the season just so that when teams with their morale or they're just new opportunity, right? Not towards the end where some teams might be tanking and some teams might be, gearing up for their vacation or anything like that. So they did it at the beginning of the year. And what they did is they coded for the amount of times that the teams touched, right? Handshake, hugs, whatever. And the amazing thing about all of that, so in 48 minutes of play, what they found is that there's probably a minute 30 of touching. And it's it's variable with each team. The cool thing that they found is that the teams that touched the most, in all likelihood, were also the teams that played more selflessly, were also the teams that played more of that team atmosphere, right? Also the teams that uplifted one another. And they found that these teams were winning more because of the amount of camaraderie and the amount of touch, which I think is a fantastic thing to study, because this is where support, this is where making sure that you're constantly taking a look and auditing your social circle. Are you around people that can engage in that same way? And I want to push this even further too. And this is where it becomes a little bit more about like, hey, external motivation is the best, right? Even just from the standpoint of these teams, like external motivation, getting those high fives, those things are going to help you to feel more fulfilled. They're going to help you to feel more connected. We are connected human beings. We enjoy that. We enjoy healthy forms of communication and also connection. So those are the external. And this is what I tend to find when I'm working with someone is like, hey, at first, I'm going to be your external motivator. I'm going to be that motivational person that's going to keep pushing you. But what we have to do during these weekly or every other week mentorship calls is we have to teach you how to create internal motivation. We have to teach you how to begin to identify and personify with someone who does X, Y, and Z for their production, for their greater health, for their relationships, for their mental health, whatever that is. Okay, so we have to teach you how to embody that type of person. So when I thought about this study and when I thought about some of the work of Mel Robbins, I thought like, hey, this is exactly what self-love looks like. This is exactly what it looks like for someone to not only be engaged in healthier patterns and healthier social circles, but also to start to see an evolution where they can, in fact, start to love themselves and start to give themselves those high fives, start to be those other teammates that they need in their life for themselves so that they can actually be great teammates, right? Whether it is literal or from the standpoint of an analogy for other things or other people in their life. So you know by now, probably the biggest thing that I want you to do from a homework perspective, again, the study was amazing. I'll make sure that I put this in the show notes because the articles that have come from it have been phenomenal. And to me, it makes total sense of why this has happened. But what I want you to do today is I want you to take a screenshot. I want you to tag us at I Made It Pod, at Desi Abeda. And what I want you to do is say like, hey, this is my version of a high five, right? So Mel Robbins does this really beautifully. Like she has someone go in the mirror and kind of touch their hand, and she'll have them take a photo and she'll tag that. You can definitely do that if you want. I think it's a cool thing. But even just with you, just by yourself, I want you to think about what your life looks like and who that person is that is your biggest fan. Like what does that look like? What do your rituals look like? What do your habits look like? Like, what does that person do where before they can even high five anyone around them, but they can high five themselves? Like, what does that person do? I love this study. Again, I'm going to put it in the show notes. I thought it was such a really great, just a really great idea because, I mean, for those of you who have been athletes or for those of you who have shared space with really great teammates and anything that you're doing, like, you know what a healthy culture looks like. And a healthy culture from this study that we've seen are ones that support one another and ones that give each other high fives, dabs, and hugs. So if anything else, if you don't do the homework, go give someone a high five that you love. Give someone some daps that you love. But even more so, before you do that, give that to yourself first. On to episode 100. Let's go.